Hey, so I was watching some videos by Rummy's Corner, which is actually one of the best boxing videos, boxing channels, I should say, on YouTube. And he was covering, in his view, the top 10 heavyweight bouts between 1990 and 2015. And he covered at least two of the three fights in the Bowe-Holyfield trilogy. I believe it was two and three. So that got me on to watching those fights, which I did. And they were indeed action-packed fights, toe-to-toe action, two real warriors. Everything you could want in a heavyweight boxing match, and they're rightly seen as great fights. I think the Bo Holyfield trilogy was to the 1990s what the Ali Frazier trilogy was to the 1970s. These were great fights. Anyway, number two was dramatic enough in itself. I mean, in terms of the fight action at the very last round, there was significant hitting after the bell. It turned into a bit of a fracas. Holyfield had to be tackled by Emmanuel Stewart. Holyfield ended up winning the fight. But what's notable about this is what happened in round seven, which will forever be known as the Fan Man fight. And basically, in round seven, Bo was on the ascendancy. Holyfield was being pushed towards the ropes, or Bo was on the ascendancy, and Holyfield kind of backs off. Now, whether this was just a defensive maneuver or whether it's because he could see what was happening and he was trying to draw attention to it, Bo's back was to the incident, so he didn't see. Mills Lane saw, and he immediately called time. Then Bo turned round to see what was going on, and you could see the people in the crowd looking up. So a guy parachutes into the ring. In case you haven't seen this, there's a number of videos where you could see the footage from different angles, although most of them don't show it directly at the moment where he hits the ring. It's just like the side view. But it has to be the strangest thing that has ever happened in, I was going to say, in a heavyweight boxing match. Perhaps one of the strangest things that has happened in any boxing match. Um, so he became known as the Fan Man. This guy James Miller. At the time, he was about, I believe, about 31 years old. He had a parachute and he had a little propel fan at the back. Um, so basically, what happened? He landed against the ropes. Mills Lane had called time. The commentators were in overdrive as to what on earth is going on here. The crowd were completely, on their feet. What's going on here? Anyway, he was dragged into the crowd, presumably to get him away from the ring, because people aren't going to know what the hell this is. Is it a terrorist attack? Is it what is it? It's such a strange thing that it takes time to actually process something like that. I imagine if you're there. Um, so anyway, he's dragged into the crowd, and on one hand, it's very funny. On the other hand, it's not funny because what he done was monumentally stupid, incredibly reckless. And there's a lot of ways to look at it. So basically, he was dragged into the crowd. Bo's security people were furious, and Bo's entourage then basically laid into the guy. And I believe he was knocked unconscious at one point. He had to be taken to hospital, not from the landing, but from the beating he got afterwards. One of Bo's security people apparently hit him 21 times. Um, and apparently, as he was being rushed to hospital, the parachute was being cut up into souvenirs by the crowd. The fight, of course, has stopped. Bo's corner had put a towel over him, so not to get cold. In this long delay, um, to this day, people will argue which fighter it benefited, which fighter it went against, but without doubt, it was an interruption on a massive scale. Because of an event of that magnitude. It would be like interrupting Klitschko Joshua, you know. So what happened was he spent a night in the Clark County Jail. He was released on a $200 bond, which under the circumstances seems pretty lenient, actually. Um, excuse me, I should say, after his release from hospital, he was taken to the Clark County Detention Center, where he was charged with dangerous flying and released on $200 bail. Pretty lenient, actually, under the circumstances. At one point, they turned the lights off because there was a fear that that would interfere with this with the lighting system, and it was I mean, this was very dangerous what he done. If he'd hit one of the lights, they could have fallen into the crowd. People could have potentially been killed. Now, this is where it was a bit strange. He initially claimed it was an accident, it was a mechanical fault. But then um, he made light of the incident. He said this was a heavyweight event, but I was the only guy that was knocked out. He gave an exclusive interview to British journalists on the grounds that it would be a secret location and they would give money to charity. And it gets stranger still. This wasn't a one off. Apparently, he'd done this at a number of sporting events throughout the mid 1990s. In 1994, the following year, the Bowe-Holyfield one was, excuse me, Bowe-Holyfield II was 1993 when this took place. January the 9th, 1994, which is exactly 25 years ago, he circled approximately 1,000 feet over the rim of the Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum on his paraglider during the Denver Broncos Los Angeles Raiders NFL playoff game. He landed in a park north of the Coliseum where he was arrested for interfering with a sporting event. Later the same month, he skydove into the middle of a Bolton Wanderers Arsenal fourth round FA Cup final match at Burnden Park in Bolton, and he served a 7-day prison sentence and deported by British authorities. Later the same year, he was witnessed by British police paragliding along the Mall, which is a well-known thoroughfare in central London, before landing on top of Buckingham Palace. He then removed his trousers, revealing that he was painted green from the waist down. He was arrested without incident, fined £200, and again deported, and he was banned from ever entering the UK again. When asked by reporters what his motives for staging these stunts were, he never gave clear answers. Regarding the Bowe-Holyfield match, um, when he originally claimed that it was an accident, he then went on to say that he interrupted it because he was opposed to violence. Now, this is a very strange thing because, number one, if you're going to make some sort of pacifist protest, a world heavyweight title fight is a strange choice. Why? Well, number one, both participants are actively, it's mutual consent. It's not like we're talking about he's protesting about the ethics of sending arms to dictatorships or child soldiers or something like that. So it was a very strange choice. Um, Miller's younger brother later said he staged the stunts because he was basically bucking society. He was mocking our rules, making up his own as he went along, kind of just making a mockery of our society and the way it works and what our expectations are. So later in life, he received death threats for these things. I can imagine a lot of hardcore sports fans really started disliking the guy for interrupting events that they'd paid to watch. Um, but there is a somewhat sad backstory to all of this. In 2003, his decomposing body was found in the Alaska wilderness because he'd went there presumably to get away from all the attention. And he left a pregnant wife and child, and it's thought that he had hanged himself. So it's kind of a sad background to all of this. And my conclusion is, based on the little I know, based on what I've read, it just seems this was a young man who just wanted attention. I think he may have had some mental health problems. Um, the things he'd done doesn't strike me as just trying to buck society. I think it's more than that. I think he must have had some sort of mental health issue. And on one hand, I've no sympathy with him because what he done was very selfish, very reckless, and very dangerous. Not just at the Bowe-Holyfield fight, in the other events as well. On the other hand, I mean, firstly, the Bowe's entourage beating him up, that was uncalled for. I can understand them being pissed off if they thought that it disadvantaged their fighter, but I don't think there was any need to beat him black and blue. That was a bit excessive. And you can also look at it from another point of view. Fan Man, I suppose, kind of drew attention to the the extreme enthusiasm that sports can leave people. The fact that they would beat a man to a pulp because he interrupted a sporting event is kind of shows the dark side of human nature. So I suppose his stunts kind of created some level of debate around those things. But ultimately, I just see a rather sad, pathetic figure. I don't think he's a Robin Hood type figure. I think he was just maybe a lonely young man who just wanted attention in the world. And all in all, I mean, the Buckingham Palace incident, it's hard not to see that as having some sort of mental health issue. I mean, what does green mean? What does any of it mean? It could well be that he was just a massive prankster and he liked getting attention. But the fact that he took his own life later on suggests to me that this was a guy who just wanted recognition in the world. And instead of being known as James Miller parachutist, he became known as Fan Man Joke, you know? And it's kind of sad. And I do wonder what went through Holyfield and Bowe's mind at the time. Like, they're in the middle of a fight, which is always an intense thing. Then, whoa, who the hell is this guy? And I'd love to know if they said something to each other about that. I've never seen interviews with either fighter about the incident. And to add to the mystique around this, there's no interviews, there's no archives available of either interviews with him or even pictures of him. There's very few pictures available. The only pictures I see, if you type into Google Images, is him in in the crowd and Bo's entourage laying into him. All in all, it's a very memorable incident. It's one of the most bizarre things that have ever happened in any sporting event, not just any boxing match, any sporting event. But I have to say, there's kind of a sad aspect to it as well, kind of a slightly tragic aspect to it that, like I say, I think he just wanted attention. I'm certainly not making excuses for what he'd done. It was right that he was charged. It was right that he faced consequences because, like I say, it was incredibly reckless. He could have killed someone. Had his foot hit one of the lights, they fell down. People could have been crushed. It was definitely a monumentally stupid thing to do, and his excuse clearly, wore thin after a very short time. So let me know your thoughts. Were you at Bowe-Holyfield II? I'd be very interested to know if you were actually at the fight. What did you see? What did you think at the time? Um, so that's James Miller, Fan Man. Um, Actually, I should say I originally came across this many years ago in a documentary by David Frost about fame, just the whole concept of fame. And it was mentioned in a segment about ordinary people, or let's say non prominent people, who try to get fame through unusual methods like eating contests, or one Irish guy decided to be buried alive for 50 days or buried underground for 50 days. Um, so in the case of James Miller, it was clearly this. I remember David Frost's commentary. A man decided to get fame by landing into an open air boxing ring, but all he got was a beating instead. And that's kind of the sad aspect of it. It is interesting to think this is way back in 1993. I wonder if something similar happened today. What would be the outcome? Would he become an internet sensation? Would he be reviled? Would he be seen as some sort of folk hero? That's an interesting question. How would he be perceived today? I think that would be interesting. So let me know your thoughts, especially if you were actually at the fight. It's worth mentioning this was mentioned in popular culture, so he clearly achieved something in terms of getting attention. There was a parody in The Simpsons. Fox Sports Net ranked Miller crashing into the boxing ring as its number one most outrageous sports moment. And you can see why. It's hard to see many incidents more dramatic than that. Um, Perhaps the Monica Seles stabbing in tennis, but really, I can't think of anything more bizarre in any sporting event. I mean, sure, you get some pretty bizarre things in wrestling, but that's all pantomime anyway. Um, so let me know your thoughts. Do you sympathize with him? Do you have zero sympathy? I'm sort of mixed. I've no sympathy for what he done, but I've sympathy for the fact that I don't know. He just strikes me as being. He must have been a very lonely young man. There was one incident, I should say, during one Olympic Games. I'm not sure if it was. I'm not sure if it was London or Rio. I think it was Rio de Janeiro. Actually, there was in one of the I think it was the 10,000 meters. There was some guy tried to rush one of the athletes from the race. That's happened a few times now. I think that's disgusting. Incredibly selfish. And, such people really deserve all the justice thrown in their direction. As to rob someone's chance of success like that is so selfish and so. So I suppose you could argue that what Miller done was robbing either Holyfield or Bowe of a potential outcome. Like I say, Holyfield won the fight. Bowe fans might say that, and it was Bowe's entourage that were furious. So Bowe fans might say he robbed Bowe of a victory there. I don't know. We'll never know. Let me know your thoughts.